Number 9. Cheyenne Kloss. According to the DuPage County Sheriff's Office, Cheyenne Kloss was last seen by her family on November 27, 2017, at her home in Downers Grove, Illinois. 2017 was extremely hard on 22-year-old Cheyenne. She watched her mother slowly pass away from liver failure. The two were very close. Not long after her mother died, Cheyenne also lost her beloved dog she's had since she was young, and the experience and pain of so much loss sent Kloss spiraling into a deep depression. A lot of people around her did their best to cheer her up, including a 38-year-old man named Brian Biddle. The two would often drink and go out together. On December 1, 2017, Cheyenne met with Brian to go to a party. Just after sunrise the next day, she started texting her good friend Chad Chanapai and asked him to pick her up. There were multiple panicked texts from her to Chad about her needing a ride, in addition to some asking why he wasn't responding quickly. When Chad finally texted back, the messages stopped. He reached out to Brian, who claimed he had been asleep for 18 hours, and Cheyenne was gone when he woke up. She didn't have a car or money for a ride. She disappeared, and no one has seen her since. She was officially reported missing by her father on December 12, 2017. 12 days after she vanished, a call to 911 was made from her phone. When the operator asked who it was, the line was quiet, and then whoever it was just hung up. Police believe the call was placed to throw off the investigation. The location of the call was pinged 18 miles from her home near a lake. Authorities and cadaver dogs went through the area, but nothing was found. Brian Biddle and Chad Chanapai are not considered persons of interest in the case, and both have been very cooperative. Cheyenne Kloss is still missing, and there is no viable evidence to help solve what happened to her. Number 8. Peculiar Paranoia. The 2014 vanishing of Lars Mittank became known as the most famous disappearance on YouTube. The video circulated worldwide, garnering tens of millions of views. Surveillance footage showed the 28-year-old fleeing from Bulgaria's Varna airport and into a nearby forest. Mittank, who was from northern Germany, and his friends had traveled to Bulgaria for a vacation. The trip went off without a hitch, minus a brawl that Mittank got into with some men, resulting in an ear injury that required him to stay behind for a few days after his friends all flew home. During that time, Mittank stayed in a hotel near the airport, at one point calling his mother in fear of his life. He told her that someone was following him and wanted to kill him. He also asked her to cancel his bank cards. It's believed that he left the hotel in the middle of the night, but where he went is a mystery. Thankfully, he arrived safely at the airport the next morning. An airport doctor tasked with medically clearing Mittank to fly reported that he was extremely nervous and suspicious of the antibiotic he had been prescribed for his injury. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet and fled the room, saying, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here." He left behind his belongings, including his wallet, ID, cell phone, and luggage. There are many theories as to what may have happened to him. Did Mittank run off into the woods and commit suicide, or experience a fatal medical emergency? Did someone steal his organs and kill him and leave him for dead, or perhaps kidnap him into a human trafficking operation? Did he make the wrong people angry, or have a mental breakdown? Nobody knows, or if they do, they aren't talking. Police and a private investigator both failed to turn up any concrete leads regarding Mittank's whereabouts or fate. New hope was brought to the case in 2020 when photos of a homeless man in Dusseldorf bearing an uncanny resemblance to Mittank began circulating on social media, but suspicions of the man's identity remain unverified. Number 7. A mysterious reappearance. Sometimes a missing person reappears under circumstances that are just as strange, if not even more so, than when they vanished. This was certainly the case for Anton Pilipa, a Canadian activist who disappeared in 2012 while awaiting trial for weapons and assault charges. Pilipa's family searched for him for 5 heart-wrenching years. Nobody had any idea what might have happened to him or where he might be. Then, in December 2016, Brazilian police in the state of Rondônia spotted Pilipa walking barefoot along a road over 6,500 miles away from the home he disappeared from, wearing dirty clothing and sporting a long, disheveled beard. He had no ID or passport on him, but a dedicated officer managed to get to the bottom of the situation with the help of foreign embassies. Anton was taken to a hospital where he escaped shortly thereafter, but authorities found him again and took him back for medical treatment. His family was shocked. They immediately flew down to reunite with him, suspecting that he had been suffering mental problems, particularly schizophrenia, before vanishing. According to the story, he made it to Brazil almost entirely on foot, somehow crossing through 10 countries without proper identification and surviving off nature and the generosity of others. He eventually reached the National Library of Buenos Aires in Argentina, which ironically turned him away for having no ID. Then Pilipa trekked 800 miles into the Amazon jungle before police found him. While Pilipa's brother, Stefan, admits that the timing of his disappearance indicates that he was perhaps running from the law, he does not believe this was the reason Anton went missing. Shortly after he was found, he was reportedly happy to be reunited with his family and doing remarkably well, despite having to answer for his criminal charges from 2012. Some people suspect that there's more to the story behind Pilipa's disappearance, especially considering the difficulties associated with crossing borders without a passport and surviving in the Amazon. But these claims remain unproven. Do you believe his story, or do you think there's more to it? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button for more true crime and mysterious disappearances. Number 6. A lifelong lie. Is it possible for someone to not realize that they are a missing person? As unlikely as it seems, yes. When Bridgeport, Connecticut resident Nettie Nance became pregnant as a teenager, she was required to provide her birth certificate as part of the approval process for affordable health care. Nettie's mother, Ann Petway, was reluctant to give her daughter the document. But the clock was ticking on Nettie's pregnancy, and she knew she needed to see a doctor. So Nettie searched through her mother's things and found documents with her name and birth date on it. Yet the Office of Vital Statistics was unable to find her birth certificate. A few days later, her mother Anne sat Nettie down and told her that her real mother had abandoned her shortly after birth. But her story didn't add up, sparking Nettie's years-long search to figure out who she really was. She eventually learned that her birth name was Carlina White, and that she was kidnapped from a Harlem hospital in 1987 after her young parents, Joy White and Carl Tyson, took her to the emergency room with a fever. Carlina was kept overnight and disappeared in the early morning hours. Petway, who had lurked around the hospital for months disguised as a nurse, blended in with real staff members, successfully eluding authorities. She spent time in prison years later, after Nettie's exhaustive search led her to her biological parents, sparking a media frenzy and a high-profile criminal case that made international headlines. Nettie's relationship with her parents, all of them, has been complicated over the years, and she struggled with being thrust into the spotlight during such a hectic time in her life. She is reportedly in touch with both Petway and her birth mother and is living a private life, avoiding the unwanted publicity that came with the case. Number 5. Cult disappearance. 25-year-old Tim Carney vanished in September 2004. He was last seen alive by his roommate at their Butler, New Jersey apartment. He contacted his employer to let them know he was running late to work, but he never arrived, and his car was found abandoned on a roadside along the border between Elizabeth and Newark. He was officially missing. Tim's parents spent painful years looking for their son with no luck. In the time leading up to his disappearance, Tim became increasingly involved with a seemingly extreme religious faction known as the Gospel Outreach. His family became concerned that the group might be controlling his decisions and behavior when 2 members accompanied Tim to the hospital to visit his aunt because they allegedly thought he was lying about where he was going. But there was little the Carneys could do about their suspicions. Tim was an adult who legally had every right to distance himself from his family if that's what he wanted to do, and even join a cult. He was actually found alive and well in 2011, and unfortunately had no interest in reconnecting with his heartbroken loved ones. Tim's location was kept concealed from the public, and although his family knows where he is, all they can do is hope that he will someday voluntarily re-enter their lives. While Tim's motives for engineering his disappearance and leaving his car on the side of the road remain unknown, many still speculate that the Gospel Outreach has something to do with his refusal to speak to people from his past. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Number 4. Murder victim found alive. In Germany in 1984, 24-year-old computer science student Petra Pazitska disappeared after a dentist appointment. She also failed to show up to her brother's birthday party, which really concerned her parents, prompting a massive but unsuccessful search. A suspect eventually came forward and confessed to killing and assaulting Pazitka, but he recanted his story. Petra's body was never found, leaving a huge question mark on her disappearance for years to come. She was legally declared dead 5 years later in 1989. Then, in 2015, over 30 years after Petra vanished, Dusseldorf police responded to a burglary call at a 55-year-old woman's home and had trouble confirming her identity. For 31 years, Petra had managed to live in obscurity with no social security card, driver's license, passport, or bank account. Petra gave no reason for why she voluntarily vanished, but told law enforcement she did not want any contact with the public or with her family. All signs point toward the woman carefully planning her disappearance, saving up money ahead of time, renting an apartment under an alias, and paying for everything in cash. By the time police caught up with her, Petra had spent over 3 decades under a different name. Her family reportedly continues to hold out hope that she will eventually reunite with them, but she hasn't tried yet. Why do you think this happens? Why would a college student want to disappear? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 3. Mother-daughter disappearance. During a supervised visit during a bitter divorce and child custody battle in 1994, Dorothy Lee Barnett took her 11-month-old daughter, Savannah Todd, and fled Charleston, South Carolina. Their disappearance initiated an international manhunt. She would later claim that her estranged, abusive husband, Benjamin Harris Todd III, had unfairly won custody of Savannah by lying in family court, leaving her with no choice but to flee for the sake of keeping her daughter safe. The pair spent time in Germany, France, Malaysia, Singapore, South Africa, and Botswana before ultimately ending up in Queensland, Australia. Along the way, Barnett married and changed her name to Alex Geldenhuys, and also changed her daughter's name. During her many years on the run and under FBI scrutiny, Barnett was framed as bitter, mentally ill, and perhaps even dangerous. She got a chance to tell her side of the story when law enforcement finally caught up to her in 2013. Geldenhuys was deported to the United States, where she served 2 years in prison for abducting Savannah almost 20 years earlier. Savannah remained in Australia, but stood by her mother, who she said must have had good reasons for abducting her. She eventually reunited with her father, but said the meeting was awkward, with just a handshake instead of a hug. Geldenhuys apparently wants to return to Australia to witness the birth of her grandchild, but is having issues gaining approval of a visa due to so-called character reasons. Number 2. Dead woman walking. In 1970, Lula Cora Hood walked away from her life in Illinois after a family fight and never looked back. She left behind her 3 children, whom her sister had adopted when Hood struggled to care for them. Her family searched unsuccessfully for her, and in 1996, a human skeleton matching Hood's petite frame was found in an abandoned brickyard in East Galesburg, Illinois. Police held on to the remains, believing they might belong to Hood, in anticipation of improved DNA technology, and the family even held a memorial service. Things took a wild turn when in 2008, DNA testing proved that the bones did not belong to Hood after all, but to someone else. The decades-old missing persons case was reopened, and in 2011, internet searches led investigators to a Jacksonville, Florida woman with the same social security number and first name as Hood. DNA testing confirmed that the woman was indeed Hood, who was 84 years old with a fading memory. She did not remember the first 3 children out of the 14 that she eventually had, but was still happy to reconnect and expressed an interest in traveling to Illinois to meet her grandchildren. Hood's relatives seemed to harbor no bitterness toward the woman for running off so many years before, presumably to escape an abusive situation, and were equally eager to make up for lost time. I think the craziest thing about this story is the 14 children. What about you? Number 1. Leaving it all behind. Michelle Whitaker was last seen alive at a truck stop in Spartanburg, South Carolina in 2002. She had just served a short jail stint for drunk driving. The Waffle House waitress had a somewhat troubled past, involving alcohol abuse and a volatile relationship with her family, but they couldn't imagine that she would deliberately leave her life and her beloved dog behind. Efforts to find Michelle proved futile. In August 2005, Police received an anonymous letter stating that Michelle had been murdered and that her body had been dumped in a specific location, but this was never confirmed. The police investigated numerous tips, but years went by with the case remaining unsolved. Then, in 2008, Michelle was found alive and well in Oregon. She had been living under her own name. A neighbor recognized her on a missing persons website and called law enforcement. Michelle didn't seem to know that her 6-year disappearance had sparked a massive missing persons investigation on the other side of the country. She had simply abandoned her troubled life to start anew. She had not contacted her family due to misunderstandings stemming from her tense relationship with them. Thankfully, Michelle and her family reconnected and healed their broken relationship, perhaps making this story the only one on today's list that has a happy ending. Thanks for watching! Which of these cases did you think was the most mysterious? Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you'd like to see more videos like these. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!